Okay, as I said, this arose from something that I discovered that I didn't know very much about myself. What I've given you is just the bare bones. They're on separate sheets, so you can sort of hold these keywords up yourself and fix one eye on the houses and one eye on the signs sort of thing, and come to a working relationship between them like that to get the interpretation for yourself, as I'll go through later on.
John, I don't think we're being recorded.
No
These
levels?
needles aren't moving at all. These needles aren't
No
going.
levels.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll read out most of this, just briefly, because something that I've come to realise as a teacher and doing a little extra reading is that each of us perceives reality in our own way. In other words, if I say one particular word like fear or lust, you know, we each interpret those words very richly in our own terms from our own experiences. And depending on how these are read, silently or aloud, or I'll read them in my way to sort of give my interpretation, my leaning perhaps on what I was trying to communicate with these key ideas. Right, okay then, when you come just across a house cusp, and it's very important I think where there's an empty house, and it's also very important when there's an unaspected planet in that house alone. Then you come back to the fact that a house cusp is really the attitude you have towards one particular thing or particular things. That was the key thing to set up. And can I just have an idea how many beginners we have? Just beginning? Okay. I'll try and, if I'm getting too complicated, you know, feel free to interrupt. I hate people, you know, just letting things flow over you and switching off. It's no need for them.
Excuse me, do you have any more films?
No, I'm sorry, I only had the 25, but we can photocopy from the Tauhara facilities if you want them. Yeah. So the houses, to me anyway, of a natal horoscope represent fields of experience or departments of life. And that means everything in your life should fit somewhere within those 12 things. If there are planets in the houses, then they represent energies that are available for use in these departments of life. They may or may not be used on a regular basis. They may not be in use at all, and I think that's specifically for an unaspected planet, which could just be floating on completely loose. But whether or not it is, they do exist, the energies, and they are available for use. And the key part now, the signs on the house cusps represent our attitudes to the matters involved with the horoscope's houses. And the planet which rules the sign on the cusp of a house helps us understand where this attitude is coming from. Literally which house it's in gives us a good idea. Where the feelings for these attitudes are grounded. And any aspects made to these ruling planets can help us understand the structure of these attitudes and see the forces which will have a major part to play in the formation of the natives' attitudes to the various matters which the houses represent. Or if you're a mature person, the ones that have led to the development of those attitudes, good or bad. Right. The houses. Right, I went all over the place to key into a consensus of opinion as to what the houses were, but rather than just give the old traditional interpretation, I tried to go a little deeper into it, into the underlying reasons from which the traditional interpretations arose. We'll come across these, not particularly in the first, but as it gets into the other houses, we'll soon see. Right, the first house should represent the primary self, the physical appearance, physical characteristics, the personality, or part of it, personal mannerisms, your awareness of self. Right, the second house, personal resources. And that doesn't mean to say how much money you have in the bank. Personal resources of yourself. Inherent qualities of the person, the ability to earn money with which to acquire possessions, our monetary prospects, finances of the native, therefore, the movable possessions of us, and materials which are valued by us. Not material values, which is ninth, but materials valued, which is second. That which we don't really, which we like, which we don't want to part with, more or less. Third house, the people with whom there is a daily mental exchange, therefore brothers and sisters, neighbours, our style of communication, short distance travelling, mental functioning, the practical everyday mind, as opposed to the philosophical, the discriminatory and associative faculties, that's the Virgo touch of the third house, of course. Contracts. Just going back to discriminatory, your mental functioning is related to that, of course. If you can't tell the difference between things, if you can't discriminate, well then you can't really associate and make practical use of. That's just sort of a low-level meaning of intelligence, I think. I've just got something down there about short journeys, you can read at your leisure. It's fairly self-explanatory. The fourth house, the base of operations which we have created and where we feel secure. Now, okay, if you're a nomadic type person, if you're a contract sharer with no fixed abode, that's practically what you stand up in. It might be a suitcase, for example. You can't just offhand say, right, that's the home and family, because there may be no such. Right, okay, the home also it can be the home, the family, if there are such. The land of the home, the surroundings, the land itself. Also the homeland. Right. The early environment. Also the conditions at the end of life. That relates back to the base of operations which we have created. We create our own surroundings towards the end of life. Where? Right. Also the final resting place. The parent who represents inner security. No mention of sex there whatsoever. You just have to find out for yourself or from a person you're counselling which one that represents. Also the foundation of one's self-regard. The home environment we carry with us, no matter where we are. The inner person, that is. And our psychic roots. Fifth house, the creative self-expression of the native. Pleasurable activities, whatever they are. Hobbies, amusements, love affairs. Also activity to which there is an uncertain outcome. 3 examples: gambling, speculation, financial, that is, and children. Some people, just a few years ago, realised that children are just about the ultimate uncertain outcome. And the raw product, that is, you know. After that, you might be able to mould them, but you know, whether they're born thalidomide or whatever you've got, or Down syndrome, you've got no control whatsoever. So it is an uncertain outcome. Mental and physical procreation sums those up fairly well. The sixth house of work, service, employees, servants in the old days. The care and maintenance of a healthy body, and therefore health. Clothes, which is also, if you fail to use those effectively, then the body does suffer, the health does suffer. Other people who provide service. And how this one got here I wouldn't know, except by trial and error. Small animals. Most people agree on that thing. Seventh house, all close personal relationships with others. Others' reactions to our own actions. Hence open enemies. Now this one comes from the polar opposite of the first house to the seventh. Literally it's us and them sort of situation. First us, seventh them. Seventh house, partnerships, marriage partners, of course. The public, once again, them, us, with a non-self. Others in general. Unions, legal affairs, lawsuits, dealings with others. Lawsuits, not contracts. Contracts being third house. lawsuits, etc. being 7th. Those who are into horary astrology, the 7th house is the 4th house from the third being contracts, the 4th house being the end of the matter of the contracts, the outcome of a contract. That's how lawsuits ties in. The 8th house, others, resources and finances. Pause there again. The 7th house being other people, the 8th house being the 2nd house from the 7th. Personal finances or resources of other people. Therefore, inherited money, possessions or property. Inherited money, possessions or property, those go together. Finances or possessions of spouse or partner, business or marriage. Also, being a psychological house, transcendence or regeneration of the spirit or body. Death, sex, other transforming experiences. And for those who haven't thought about it deeply, sex is a transforming experience. Another person must be involved, I think. No. But in the form of the 8th, it's not an 8th house experience, if it's not okay. It's more or less the first. Yeah, right. You can argue about this one. We argued about this, about, where do you find a person's car in a horoscope? If the person is in love with their car, it's a 5th house, maybe. If it's purely something to get from A to B, is it a 6th? Is it a servant to you? And so on, Yeah, if a car is a friend, if it's the only thing you rely on, well, it's 11th house possibly. It's very mystic, right. 9th house, expansion of mind through physical, mental or spiritual exploration. Is that a bit fast? Hence, religion, philosophy and higher learning. Knowledge gained from long distance travelling. The natives' belief system, their code of ethics, their moral principles. Also laws in general and legal systems, the systems, not the laws themselves. Well, whatever. Okay, then holding these in one hand more or less, you can sort of, the sign sheet in the other, you can more or less match up your house cusp sign, which has nothing to do with sun signs. I've culled out a lot of sun sign interpretations. Just at random, this is what will be done like this. 10th house, for example, say, what's your attitude to the parents who represents the outer world, your external security? You can look at the keywords in the other hand like this. I'll get to that in a second. Your attitudes towards career, 10th house career. Honour, reputation, status, whatever. Employers, government, people in authority over the native. The carrying out of responsibilities before the world. Now if you keep the sheet and sort of look back at it every so often, you'll get a little more glimpse of realisation, I think. Some of these are extremely deep. It'll take a lot of experience and a lot of thinking to really get to the bottom of some of these. Right, the 11th house, group affiliations, creative expression in a group situation, as opposed to 5th house self. Our hopes and wishes are 11th house, our long-term objectives. Friends, friendships of course, humanitarian endeavours, social reform. And 12th house, which is quite hard to do of course, self-redemption in general. Service, which is sacrificial. The subconscious mind, that which is hidden, anything that is hidden with our lives. Places where contact with the inner realms is possible, therefore retreats, hospitals, prisons, other large institutions. Also sorrows, secret enemies, serious ill health, and large animals. Okay, I've just tried to give a little bit of my own personal lean into it the way it was read, just a little bit of padding like that. Is there any questions so far? Just pausing here about any of the houses or that?
Very large animals.
Why large animals? That's what I'd like to know. If any of you can, yeah.
Yes, but it's associated with Pisces, isn't it? And the way I think of the small animals in the 6th house and large animals in the 12th house, it's as if small animals, in other words, domestic animals like cats or dogs, it's almost a bit like the servant relationship. They are there to, keep you company. I suppose, animals also 5th house. It's difficult, but they're sort of like round the house, and traditionally a cat is there to catch the mice and the dog is there to protect you and so on. It's almost like the servant when I think of it. Whereas large animals, our relation to them is our sense of they're not actually our servants. Well, I don't know, elephants I suppose could sort of drag logs along, I don't know, but it's sort of animals as they're other beings that are part of our relation to the universe in the Piscean sense. That's the way I see it. I know it's a bit arbitrary, but I think that's where it comes from. That large animals sort of like represent other beings, and our sense of this is really an other being, whereas small animals like part of our daily routine, which I think is what the 6th house is about too. It's just, I think that's what I've really
maybe small animals is domestic.
Yeah, that's right, domestic animals. Yes, not just small, but domestic.
A horse is a servant, but he'd come under a big...
Could do, yes, that would be, whereas a raccoon might be 12th house or yeah, that would be right. Domestic and
Couldn't a pet come under the 5th house?
Subconscious mind in the 12th house. I see the 12th house, Neptune, Pisces, Trinity, so to speak, as the aspect of the subconscious mind which is collective, and the fourth house more sort of to do with the personal side of the lunar subconscious, that which is formed by upbringing and is very easily accessible from the external, whereas the 12th is not so easily, is not influenced from the outside.
The collective conscious, or collective unconscious.
Collective unconscious.
Conscious and 4th, yeah.
Well, 12th. And also to a lesser extent,
This came up during all the reading and that sort of thing. I had to establish my own values. Yes, it did come up. The personal consciousness 4th, or unconsciousness, which you can tap and analyse.
what about the 8th then? That's also the unconscious and the sort of, in a sense, isn't it?
It's hard to get
Is
to
it
grips
not,
with
like
these.
the 8th house is psychotherapy and things like that?
Yeah, anything psychological.
So the 8th is that not more sort of the unconscious, which one gets access to through the sacrifice of between two individual people, where the access is gained in the 12th, or sort of more between you and the collective. Sacrificing something of yourself so that you become part of the collective, rather with the 8th, it's between you and me and him, me and her, whatever.
Right.
Yeah, that sacrificial thing, I think we have to watch that. It's a very subtle thing, John. It needn't necessarily be a negative thing. Some of us might sort of feeling that it's a negative thing.
I see it as
Right.
positive.
Because it's emerging our identity, we can actually make the greatest growth in our lives, can't we? Worse it can be sacrificial and negative, but at best it can be a wonderful opportunity for growth.
Good. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, there is nothing negative in the chart really. It's only if you're right. It's a way of paying back your karmic responsibilities too. It's possibly the only way through. Coming back to large animals too, you Debbie got on about they are our servants. A goldfish is totally responsible to us for its life. If we just don't clean it out, well, it floats upside down. But with a horse or an ox or a large animal, we do have to tend them. The stable boy, this sort of thing, grooming the horse, having it shod. With a cat, you don't normally do this sort of thing, or a dog,
There is a point seeing 12th house as secret enemies, or maybe not today, but in days gone by, certainly large animals would have been their enemies at one time. Even the horse probably was a formidable opponent until he was tamed.
Oh, they're only about so high.
I think it was me.
Yes, right.
That situation. I don't think the animals have any responsibility there.
I'm wondering if sometimes a pet couldn't be treated as a 5th house, a substitute child.
Oh, yes. You too, right,
And
yes.
so you would use the 5th house in that case.
Yes, substitute.
Where's the 4th house?
Yes, right.
Third house from brother or sister.
Fourth house is the 12th house from the
Second
5th.
house from which you can, which you extend your background and incorporate with yourself. Or the 12th house from for something you sacrifice for a god, you know?
Okay. Right, okay. Now, keeping that in mind, and not forgetting as one slight scrap of it, and using the other hemisphere of your brain for the signs, we might be able to get somewhere in some communication. Right, these are your attitudes. If you have an Aries cusp, I'll just pause while you go back to your own chart, possibly, and think where you have Aries on the cusp. This is the sign. So, what's our deadline, by the way? 11 o'clock? 10? I've forgotten. Our finish time, morning coffee time? 11, okay, great, fine. Just doing a mild panic then. Right, the signs, once again, I'll say, don't get trapped in your own sun sign with this. This is a real problem with beginners. You actually have to fight to get away from your own ego. Look purely at Aries in your chart. If you're not an Aries person, it's a lot easier sort of to pick on these ones. Where is Aries in your chart? I know where mine is. Wherever that is, you should have initiative. You should be assertive, impulsive, enthusiasm for it, impatient, whatever. You're also likely to be a great beginner and a poor finisher in those areas of life. Too bad if you've got it on your 7th. Eighth house.
John, can we? I'd like to ask a question, but
Great.
but I think it's something that could go on. I'm aware of the danger in asking the question because it's got a potentially very long answer. It's to do with house systems. I realize that if you go to that K-Pro machine, you can get 8 different choices on the menu of houses. Okay, and what I've got here, Cusps for Placidus equal has Campanus and Coke. And I'm looking at it and I'm seeing that with one I have an intercepted house and with another it's not. And I'm saying for your purposes here, what do you recommend that we...
Oh, this is great, yeah, because this is exactly what you need. Sort of you can go back and say, well, in my outer level perhaps, you know, which of these is working for me? And you can actually pinpoint, looking at your polarities and your intercepts like this through this.
Okay.
With
And
these
then-
intercepts on
I
yeah.
the
was
past,
going to
so-
ask about it.
Yeah. And then looking back, I'm coming to that later. But then looking back at the other charts, you know, where there are no intercepts in that, you know, is this describing perhaps your spiritual life, or is this, you know, some other form apart from your normal everyday workable life? Is it your creative potential sort of thing that fits better and so on? This is for us to find out, you know. Just because Placidus is here and now for most of us, well, most New Zealanders seem to think it fits the country pretty well, but then does it fit you?
Well, okay.
You're not sure yet, are you?
Well, I'm not sure. Yeah, actually,
Okay.
most Americans say
Yeah.
things go better with Coke.
Yeah, right.
They do.
Okay. So, fine. Okay, that's right. Right. Wherever Aries is in your chart, then it's sort of I want it now. Now I have mine on my 11th. So as far as my long-term objectives go, you know, sort of I think of it, I want it, I must have it. It's very difficult for me to look over the book tables, for example. I see something that triggers off a new avenue, perhaps, and financially it's not very good for you, is it? And so on. Right, wherever Aries is, we're sort of lacking in moderation, lacking in forethought quite often, and humility. Right, wherever Taurus is on your chart, you're probably fairly determined, enduring, conservative, patient, all these Taurus things. Particularly, just to emphasise one of those, they're possessive because of an inner need for security. Now, if you've ever wondered why Taurian people, very Taurian people, tend to hang on to things. If a wife, for example, suddenly decides that the pillow on her husband's favourite chair is worn out and threadbare and replaces it without mentioning it to him, It could create quite a problem. This is for a very Taurian person, but we all have Taurus somewhere.
Sure.
Yeah.
I've seen a viewpoint that Cancer people are possessive to some extent through the need of security. Taurus possessive through a need for luxury. Or more than just security.
Tangible, yes. Not emotional security, which is more Cancer being a water sign. Taurus is an earth sign, that which can be touched.
Sensual processes.
The five
More
senses.
the good living, more than just security for Taurus.
Yes, comfort, I think, some
Yeah,
stupid.
tourism
Physical
applies to
comfort.
Jared.
Physical comfort.
And you're going to explain about intercepting.
I'll try and cover intercepts later on, yes, right, yeah. Okay, if I forget at the end, okay, could you bring me up on that one, because I've just got a brief jotting. Okay, finishing off Taurus then, where Taurus is on your cusps, your attitude towards it, you should lack some enterprise, some adaptability and vision. There's nothing wrong with Taurian vision, except it doesn't get very far ahead. They're inclined to, where Taurus is in your chart, you could be inclined to encounter obstacles that you weren't expecting, simply because of your attitude to the matters. Even if you're a highly mutable person, you know, this can happen just in that area.
If you had it on two cusps, would they refer to two houses, or just in between the house that it's in?
It gets complex. When you've got an intercept, you've actually got three things going on at once. You have the sign on the cusp, you've got the intercept, and you've also got a little bit of sign at the end there. Okay, and this is where it gets complex. But Taurus, your basic attitude will be as listed here, sort of thing. It'll be
Which house do you apply it to?
both. Anything connected with those two houses, you will probably have that flavour of Taurus in your attitude towards them. But if there's planets inside, or there's an intercept and this sort of thing, it gets complicated. Right, where Gemini is on your chart, you're likely to be adaptable, changeable, restless in those matters. Dual-natured, perhaps, two attitudes. Gemini on your seventh, what does that mean? Right. Alert, unstable, inconsistent, nervous, excitable, improvisation, imitative, inquisitive. Right. I've got it on my first. I still think, so I should be inquisitive about my personal body incarnation, call it what you like. One of my most enjoyed books was when I was about 8 years old. I found a medical dictionary, illustrated medical dictionary. I spent weeks on it. Yeah, it was amazing. It was really good. I was finding out about me. And so on. Identifying, classifying is also Gemini. Gemini lacking concentration in those areas of life, hard to relax in those matters, not very good at organising, a little bit mercurial perhaps.
With that concentration, I kind of like the feeling it's lacking in the sustained concentration.
Right, it's very hard to settle on one thing.
Because I think the initial perception is very good and acute.
Yes. But it's very, very mutable. I think Gemini, rather more than Virgo, being mutable here. Okay, Cancer on the cusp. You're very touchy about it, tenacious. Back to my own chart again, that's possessions. A pack rat sort of person would have Cancer on the second, depending on how the moon is. Touchy and defensive about whatever house is involved, the matters. Receptive, maternal. Is protective in there? Maternal suggests protective. Moody, parental, cautious. All those things. Extraordinarily sensitive about the matters involved. Easily hurt. Inconstant. Caring for others' needs. There's some houses that doesn't really mean much to. Irritable, clannish, economical, and so on. Allowance for rainy days. Where Cancer is in your chart, you tend to lack logic, lack stability, in a Cancer way rather than a Gemini Right. Stability in Cancer would tend to flow in a change. An Aquarian instability would be sharp change. A Gemini instability would, right, it's like a box full of grasshoppers sort of thing going, yes, right, scatter, unpredictable, quick. Switch to your other side, Gemini. Right, Leo and Cusp. Authority, flamboyance in the matters concerned, self-confidence, theatrical, dramatic, vanity in the matters involved, dignity, radiating, vivifying. Aren't these nice words, Bruce? Exuberant, ardent, inspiring faith, yeah, right. Watch that one there, Bruce, called indolent. It comes from the magnanimous sort of thing, right, you know that. Impetuous and inconstant if unfulfilled. That's one that doesn't often come up. And I especially like that one, unconquered in defeat. Right, you might be right down to it, but by crikey, you're just not going to admit it. You know, this pride, this reserve is going to, there's no way. In the matters involved. Leo, you lack thrift, humility, altruism, attention to detail. Altruism, those that haven't come across altruism before, that's more or less an Aquarian word. What's a quick interpretation of altruism? It's unselfness, isn't it? It's giving towards a common cause with no self-interest, right?
When you usually lose something, or not lose something, you sacrifice something.
Yes, although Aquarian doesn't often sacrifice, they just reckon they're going to sacrifice, but still, you know, that's true altruism, rather than Aquarian altruism. Virgo, wherever Virgo is, there'll be some analysis, assimilation, whatever that means, with matters involved, discrimination, good discrimination, self-dedication in a Virgo way, perfectionism, criticism, modesty in the matters concerned, possibly, depends. Urge to be of service, unassuming, restoring order, precise, and so on. And where Virgo is, you tend to lack tolerance, you lack your optimism, lack some breadth of vision.
The assimilation would be mental assimilation, otherwise it's Cancer. Mental.
Not an enveloping, it's the right one. Right, good. I like this feedback, it's really good. It stops you going to sleep too, doesn't it? Okay. Libra. Right, Libra says the concise Oxford Dictionary. Where this Libra, there should be harmony, well, an aim towards harmony, some diplomatic approach, a balanced feeling, or a need for balance, charming potential, indecisive perhaps, dependent, approval seeking. There's no sign more concerned about what others feel for it than Libra. Strong. No, I think Libra would sacrifice more for others' approval.
More
Appreciation. Yes.
Love appreciation.
Right.
How does it work out when the planet is not on a cusp, it is, the sign is right in the house?
Enclosed and intercepted, you mean?
Right, I'm just learning.
Yes, that's, yes, I see.
There are different signs.
Like it's Virgo on the cusp, Libra, and on the other cusp it'll be Scorpio, right.
It means, right?
Libra on the cusp, Virgo on the cusp, say Libra inside the house,
Yes.
and Scorpio on the next cusp. Yes, that's right. I'll do a separate interpretation of that one later on. I'll try, yeah. Okay. Call that intercepted, it's just the common phrase for it, right. Right, where were they? Sense of fair play and justice, also in the matters concerned. Our peacemaker. Seeking the help of another. Right, wherever Libra is, you tend to grab someone in those matters concerned, or you at least seek the advice of someone else concerned, right? need for approval, companionship, strategist. I think Mr. Muldoon's a fairly good example of a Libran strategist. Napoleon was another one, except Napoleon didn't take notice of the weather report, did he? Right. Yes, that's strategy, Libran style. Planning in advance, winning the battle without firing any shots quite often. Libran in that area of the
I
chart.
remember Gareth Carpenter said about Mrs. Muldoon's chart in his thing, and you were saying a healthy Libran tactic was to rock the boat and then rush around and fix it.
Right.
So they did something to fix.
And who else is better at being overseas at the right time when the balance swings the other way? And so on. Our liberal to firmness, decisiveness and consistency. Scorpio then, when you have it on your house cusps, we have power, and that's much more powerful than Leo's glowing power, the sun suggested power. It's a power of darkness kind of power if necessary. It's ultimate power coming to that. It's also repression, possibly, in the matters concerned, self-control, probing, incisive, eliminating or regenerating the matters involved, destructive, ruthless, intense, secretive, possessive, courageous, never superficial, keenly perceptive and seeks perfection in the matters involved. That's your attitude anyway. Passionate, transformative, transformation, despising weakness. I think despising weakness gives you a good clue to what kind of power Scorpio power is in you. And also Scorpio, where it is, you tend to lack forgiveness, and you can also misdirect your energy, the right direction of energy. Right. Okay, where's Sagittarius in your chart? A little bit biased here. I tend to put all the good ones towards the front. I won't go through too much. Those are all fairly normal, straightforward Sagittarian keywords. Notice the last one though, luck or achievement by positive thinking. This is where Capricorn tends to fall down, or a Capricornian attitude. Sagittarius, the true Sagittarian with a strong influence, is the shoulder shrugger if things go wrong. There's no reason why I should lower your sights the next time around. You know, this should work in your chart in the same way, providing Jupiter's fairly comfortable. Sagittarian, you tend to lack restraint in that area, lack fixity of purpose, lack thought for others. It's a bit strange for me, I've got it on the 7th. Right, Capricorn, where's that? Stability, etc. Climbing, conservation. Just skim these. Sure-footed. Sure-footed, which means you tend to structure things, of course, which is a Capricornian thing. There's something that isn't there though, and that's fairly much delays. Wherever it is, so you have it on your 5th, you'll tend to be a late starter in love affairs. Have it on your 8th. Puberty's been going a long time before it, it gets really used, whatever. There'll be delays somewhere usually with Capricorn. Sensitive but doesn't show it, that's Capricornian. Also an attitude. Every man for himself, I think, sums it up pretty well. It's self-survival. Capricorn, you lack buoyancy, sociability, and effective self-expression in those matters. Right. Right, so where's Aquarius on your chart? This is... I'll leave you just skim through those two. Zealot is a bit strong perhaps for a lot of us. Fanatical is good enough. I think perverse and eccentric explains it pretty well.
That's pretty hard.
Yeah. There's a lot of bad words for Aquarius there, isn't there? There's also the good ones.
Perverse, please.
Heck no.
I don't mind eccentric, even individualistic, and certainly misunderstood. Occasionally fanatical and revolutionary, definitely unpredictable and humanitarian, but definitely not perverse.
No, that's the negative side we've entered there. And you should put that in your lap.
What is perverse? Perverse is doing the opposite of what people expect us to do, is that right? Perverse is doing what is the opposite of other people expect us to do.
Purposely going out.
But in Aquarius, I think it's a lack of yield, a refusal to yield.
Aquarian, yeah, the Aquarian, let's see, on the 6th would tend to wear a white suit to a funeral sort of thing, you know, like this.
Very good.
That's on the 6th for clothing, you know, depends on that.
Which sign, Aquarius?
Say you had Aquarius on the 6th of clothing sort of thing, you know, they do have eccentric clothing, you know, it just depends.
So that's mine.
No, it doesn't have to, but you know, the tendency to do something out of the ordinary, mostly to express your individuality. This is where the Aquarian perverseness, sorry to come back to that one, the eccentricity really lies. I don't really want to wear this, but everyone else is wearing those other things. I'm me, sort of. This is Aquarius. Yeah. Okay. Aquarius also lacks the human touch. Now somebody said, this is typical Sagittarian quote, somebody said somewhere that the Aquarian would tend to forget about the old lady who's bedridden next door with an illness while she's out sort of helping feed the world through Corso, this sort of thing. You know? That's what lacking the human touch means. It's not a criticism at all.
But yet humanitarian.
But yes, humanitarian. Yeah. To serve
the
the...
very crux of the beliefs that it's humanitarianism is the humanitarianism that it thinks is.
Yeah. I'm trying to get away from the fixed and cardinal here because there's just so much to cover. It's, you know, but it's all involved, as you said. Yeah. Great. Pisces on your chart, compassionate in the areas involved. Too bad if you got it on your 8th. Unworldly, confused, trusting, easygoing. People tend to leave footprints up and down your back where you've got Pisces. Sensitive, mysterious, disorganized, receptive, impressionable, dreamy. Now, not unselfish, but unselfish down there. Don't think there's any other way to really express that. It's a bit hard to use words because there are feelings that words just can't express. But unselfish is quite deep. Deceivable down there with Pisces too. Lacking determination, lacking concentration. I've got a great respect for Pisces' brains, but you know, you can strike 10 fuzzy ones before you hit one really sharp one, but by golly, when you get a good one, it's a beauty. Someone trapped in their sun sign down the back there again, right? Yeah.
Can you talk about intersex? Because often they seem almost contradictory.
They are contradictory because
hard to reconcile.
they are. Okay, well I'll pause there for intercepts if you like. I'll just give you one example. I was working with a man, this was teaching, a couple of years ago. I just did his chart. He was a Piscean guy. He had an intercept in his 10th. Right. He was Aries on the 10th, and intercepted there was Taurus. And I said, oh gee, you know, well, if you've got these sort of double approaches towards your career, there's this leadership thing going on which you seem to be going through at the moment. He wasn't so much a teacher as a leader. He enjoyed the leadership thing.
It's a good idea, actually, John, to put up what you're talking about on a piece of chalk on the board to describe it.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Yeah, he enjoyed the leadership aspect of teaching. Like there's the Aries Taurus Gemini thing on his 10th like that. I don't know what was around here, it was fairly irrelevant. But I was surprised because, you know, I said, has any of this shown up? Is there any of the material values things that have become important to you? He said, oh, no. He sort of laughed it off and he said, I'm quite happy here. Anyway, at the end of that year, his job sort of ran out and he wasn't guaranteed another job. He ended up working in a timber factory down the road, you know, with his hands like this. He was definitely not in a leadership position. He had changed his position where he was prepared to give up his leadership pleasures, if you call it, simply for his personal comfort. So you've got this sort of double attitude in the house. You can't say when on earth it's going to happen. You might be able to go and work it out through your transits and say, this happened when the midheaven perhaps opposed Venus, something like this happened, or a progressed ascendant, or even a Pluto transit, or if it's a sudden thing, it could be a Uranus transit, square opposition. Yes.
This is with an intercepted house, but as you were saying before, there's usually 2 signs involved in every house anyway.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Don't know. The basic attitude, the first one to come through will be the one that starts you off in life. And generally that's the one you carry with you.
So it's only where there's an intercept you look at the dual meaning. So you'd have a Gemini and there, for instance.
Now, what if there are planets in Taurus in that?
Then it gets very complicated. That's a whole subject in itself.
If you have like 9 degrees or something like that on a cusp, without an intercept, you've got mainly the next sign going through it. So do you feel it then, or is it still the one that's on the cusp that is the main feeling or the main colour?
You'll just have to find from experience, really, but yes, I would say mostly.
Yes.
Especially a 29 degree. Has anyone else got a 29 degree cusp? Must be 1 or 2. It's probably radically very important, is it? That accentuated, that particular one? Does it stand out very much more than the others?
Yeah, actually, yes.
If you've got your chart rectified properly and it's a 29 degree cusp, it's usually fairly very important.
More especially on the angle.
Yeah, right, on the angles
Does it mean
especially.
that you have a lack of understanding of the people who have that as a stone sign?
Could say that, but it just depends on the person how they're using it, really.
Do you think they'd have to really
I
have
have
that?
still in Scorpio as well. Especially Scorpio.
Do you think they'd have to work harder at that intercepted sign than any others?
There's a good tape on it from Chris McRae from the 1980 lectures of the Society, which we have in the Society. It's a big advantage to Auckland people. I've done a transcription of it, which took several hours, of course, but the intercept, according to her, because she has great knowledge, with the Canadians being up there at the higher degrees, it's a bottled up area usually. It's very hard to express anything that's inside the intercept, especially planets. And if they progress outwards, you can suddenly get a tremendous change of life as this thing comes out of the... It's like, she said, it's like having a door without a key. And later on during your life, by progression, this quality which is you've been struggling to achieve all your life can suddenly burst forth quite dramatically.
Yes, I've got 4 intercepts.
Yeah.
So I've got nothing intercept.
So what did you say about it was at 29 degrees?
The 29th cusp, it suggests it's a last chance sort of thing. It's a very critical, it's, you know, the 1st and the 29th, the 1st normally it's a new experience. 29th. I'm just groping here because I haven't...
Is that for planets too?
Especially for planets, yes.
Oh my God, amazing thing.
I suggest you do some reading. I think one of the better articles on the 29th degree was in Francis Sequoian's Predictive Astrology book. She calls it the anoretic planet. It's better than nothing. We can come to the same understanding ourselves by seeing people with 29th degree planets. it's sort of, if you don't get it together in this incarnation, well, that's it, sort of, you know.
Surely.
Well, that's what she suggests, but you know, it's really a critical. It's. Well, she says it's the last chance.
And what book is it of?
Predictive astrology. I bought it not for the interpretation of the transits, but for the stuff up the front like that.
Yeah.
But if you know somebody else with it, it's an expensive book, it's a thick book, and most of it is of marginal value. But some of the stuff up the front with singletons and I forget them.
And getting back to the cusp,
Yeah.
even though you've got say 29 degrees on the cusp, that's still very important to that house, even though it's a small period.
Well, it should be your initial attitude, yeah. But having an intercept, you have double attitudes. It's just that you can't really, I don't think you can predict when you're going to switch attitudes, or if it will switch back. He was very unhappy working in the timber yard, the chap I was working with. But he was prepared to sacrifice. I think that was the clearest example. Came as a bit of a shock to me, actually. I don't like predictive work. Okay, the time is 10:40. We have 20 minutes left. I better go through the others and I'll leave any interpretation towards the end, okay? Right, we have then the attitude, the initial attitude. After that, we start digging a little deeper if it's an important matter, especially if it's an empty house and it's a matter of importance to the person at the time. Normally an empty house would mean it's not a matter of great importance. You wouldn't put yourself particularly out. That's normally. I'll quote from Stephen Arroyo at the beginning, and although he is talking about the ascendant, it applies just as much to any of the house cusps. He says, for the ascendant, there are 12 basic types of Aries rising, depending on the sign position of Mars. In other words, Mars in Aries rising when Mars is in Aries itself is very much different to a person with Aries rising when Mars is in the sign of Cancer. Cancer being a very moody, unpredictable, emotional thing, and Aries, Mars in Aries is a very go-getter, energetic, fiery sign. You know? So therefore, we have the 12 basic types of Aries. Also, you can have 12 types of Taurus rising, depending on the sign position of Venus, and so on. So that's why so many people are so different with a similar chart. Both the sign and the house position of the ruling planet are important factors in any chart. Although he says house position is much more important than sign position if the planet involved is Uranus, Neptune or Pluto. I wouldn't know. Haven't really spent much time on that.
It's the generation aspect, I guess, where it's been such a long time there that you're
Right.
talking about
Perhaps
500 million people all and
perhaps it's just harder for us to distinguish at this stage in the game.
that's, yeah.
Right. So, the position of the ruling planet signifies the primary energy and the area of life experience that motivates us to act in the world. This is for the ascendant. Try that again. The position of the ruling planet signifies the primary energy and the area of life, that's the house, experience that motivates you to act in the world. Jane Ivey was getting back to this at the last winter solstice. She was going back to the physical comfort when you're under stress. Go back to the ruler of the first house, the ascendant ruler. She was more or less on key, I think, but it's a bit tricky. Right. He says, in addition, the element of the ruling planet's sign is often indicative of the level of experience that gets your physical energy flowing. Still on the first house, the ascendant. And since the ascendant itself represents the generalized experience of being yourself and realizing your individual nature most spontaneously, the house position of the ruling planet can be said to represent the specific field of life activity where you can experience your essential nature most immediately. So if it's that complex for the first house and you've got 12 houses, it gets extremely complex. I was pretty freaked out by the time I got around to this. I just didn't know when it was going to stop. Right, so the ascendant then in particular, the ascendant is the point of great personal importance. And the comments, of course, apply to all the other house cusps as well. So, it pays you to go back and look at the house ruler, I think, particularly if it's in the sign of its exaltation, its rulership, its fall or its detriment. Am I talking over anyone's heads there? You are? I am. Yeah. Okay. No, I will for some people though. Why not? Okay, Mars rules Aries, so if Mars is in Aries, it's in the sign of its rulership. It's significant if it's in a house cusp rule. Okay. If Mars is in Capricorn, it's its most workable sign, really, because Capricorn doesn't waste energy for no material gain. So this is why Mars in Capricorn is in its sign of exaltation. The energies just aren't wasted for no return. You think twice before you do things. You don't go off ploughing a field until you know that your seed order is going to come in. This sort of thing. You're inclined to shift furniture out of the way of people tripping over it and this sort of thing, but the practical experience of energy. Right, take Mars in Cancer on the other hand, which is its sign of detriment. No, it's sign of its fall, I'm sorry. Which is the opposite of Capricorn. Mars in Cancer would tend to be, I don't feel like doing that sort of thing now. This is exactly it. The energy mood is unpredictable. It's off and on sort of thing. Cancer is like the moon's phases, changeable. No, this is why. Right. And the moon in Taurus. Oh, no, I didn't finish off Mars, I'm sorry. Mars in Libra doesn't really like doing things on their own. There's this tossing up, shall I do it, shan't I do it sort of thing. This is the Libra thing, looking at both sides of the matter. When Mars is in that sign, you can be so unsure of yourself, whereas in Mars in Aries goes ahead on their own and does it. Mars in Libra might stop to ask someone else's opinion, or feel a need to, an uncertainty. This is how they work. Each planet has these 4 signs like this, and Pluto we're still arguing about its exaltation sign. Okay, and the moon in Taurus is a very comfortable sort of position. I really get, they're very easy people to get on with. Anyone here with moon in Taurus, comfortable natured people. Moon in Scorpio can be so intense, So whatever, if your house cusp is Cancer, and your moon is in Scorpio, you're going to have a much more intense feeling towards that Cancer cusp and the matters involved, and a person with moon in Taurus. More easygoing, relaxed, comfortable in that. That's getting back to the house rulers. The moon in Cancer, I don't know about that one. You just have to work these out for yourselves in a way. Jupiter in Sag is good, but you can go off the deep end sort of thing. This is when you have a Sagittarius on a house cusp. Jupiter is in Sagittarius. Would tend to get a lot more carried away on that matter where Sagittarius is on a cusp than a person with Jupiter and Capricorn, for example. Venus in Pisces is a very unselfish person. Venus in Pisces is really very diffuse, whole world sort of thing, and in touch with the universal spirits. With Venus, you tend to love everybody. Also, Piscean confusion, you don't know whom to love. You tend to share, it's a bit tricky. That confusion, coming back to a Libra house, a Libra ruled house, on the cusp I should say, you get that flavour. You don't just have a straight Libra feeling, you've got to take into account if it's in Pisces, that unselfishness, that tendency to confusion, because there are so many things coming at you, which is a Pisces thing. The confused Pisces is the one who's receiving so many messages, in theory, that you really don't know which one to follow. Okay, Saturn, Jupiter's exalted in Cancer because, I believe, of benevolent emotions, kindness, sympathy, protectiveness. Jupiter is a very fatherly sort of thing in Cancer. It's at its best, it's exalted in Cancer. And for the same reason, Saturn in Libra, there's less loneliness probable, and Saturn in Libra would tend to find balance in social awareness. It's also a little less rigid, a little more balanced than usual. Sure.
Sorry, do you want to touch the remote? Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, I was just buzzing through the exaltations here. Why is Saturn exalted in Libra? There's more feeling for the other person, I think. Saturn in Capricorn is great, but it does tend to be very sort of self, although very structured and good. You know, it doesn't really particularly think about the other person, Libra, others. Uranus in Scorpio is exalted because the intuition is connected with Scorpio's depth and persistence, which Aquarius, or Uranus I should say, isn't that strong on. And also tends to have a profound grasp on the mysteries of life and death, regeneration, all that sort of thing. And, okay, right, now I haven't that much time left, so I'll buzz through these ones. Right, the aspects to the house rulers. Now going back, that was the structures behind things. So sort of looked at this, and this one, for example, Aries on the cusp, what sign is Mars in? You've got to consider, is it a wishy-washy sign like Libra? You know. Does it have any aspects to it? Now, if it's unaspected, you've got no idea. This attitude is sort of free-floating if Mars is unaspected. But if there are aspects, then there will be life experiences behind this attitude. As a child, it'll be very unformed, but as you grow, you have the life experiences. Right. Right, looking at the aspects in a humanistic way, and I don't know if many of you are involved in that, there are links between planetary energies to be used for better or worse. If there's no aspect, then there's no natural course to follow, but you can consciously integrate the two energies involved between planets, any two planets, if you're conscious of what they represent. There is no bad or good aspects between planets. There will be challenges or problems, especially if you have no realization or irritations from harder aspects, as they say. Things will be easier, or you'll have more opportunities with easier aspects, but you can really mess them up too, as most of us know. Any kind of link is workable in some way. This is getting down to harmonics, which is the 5th of a circle, 7th of a circle, 9th, 11th. You know, it goes on forever. So if you keep going long enough, there will be some link, even if you get down to 1/360th of a circle. Right. So I'll actually go from the outer planets inwards, starting with Pluto. If there's an aspect from a house ruler to Pluto, it will involve the use of force in some way, or there'll be some major destructuring of the attitude through events that cause a total change in your attitude. This might ring a few bells with some of you. Change towards the house concerned. So it's a typical Plutonian process of life and death, death of one way of life, followed by a totally new way, using the same ingredients, but in a new way. That can be painful or joyous transformation, depending on how aware we are, really. And particularly whether the person is too secure with the old way of life, too fixed perhaps. If it's fixed thing involved. This is just using keywords, you know. Neptune. If Neptune forms an aspect to a ruler, the attitude to the matters of the house concerned is or will be idealized, or at some stage dissolved. Now when you're talking about Pluto, use of force will be sufficient for the task, possibly a bit too harsh or excessive, but with Neptune, unless you're well tuned in spiritually, there's a lot of scope for self-delusion in the matters involved, or delusion through other people. Perhaps this is an opposition from Neptune to that house ruler of that one involved.
Well grounded through Saturn.
Yeah. Okay. Right, in a Neptunian aspect, perhaps to a house ruler, you can be taken in by other people perhaps, and made use of, doormat as we mentioned before. If your faith isn't grounded in reality, it's self-delusion. I'll come down to Saturn shortly. Then again, you might be in a Neptunian fog about your attitudes towards the matters of the house, whose ruler is aspected by Neptune. You might be unsure. It's quite possible. Until you come to terms with it. Right, if Uranus forms an aspect to the house ruler, there's a lot of concern with your individuality, the freedom in doing your own thing with the house concerned, or houses. When a house ruler is aspected by Uranus, this can end up as an innovative change in the attitudes of the houses concerned, or a dramatic change of attitude brought about by a feeling of non-growth or lack of identity, selfness, that Uranus can transmit. And in a natal aspect, house ruler with Uranus also signifies a progressive or radical potential in the areas linked by that aspect, depending on how it's handled. Right. Saturn. Liz Green's book Saturn says a lot, I think. I can't go into too much depth now. Contact with Saturn is really a contact with Saturn, whether it's trine, sextile, semi-square or square or opposition. The matters concerned with the house that's ruled as aspected with Saturn tend to become rigid with time, rigid within time, through fears for your security, and possibly through disappointments or losses or frustrations. We can develop a hard-headed or a cold-blooded attitude, Nixon Watergate type attitude. Here is a Capricorn Sun. In survival no matter what in the house matters concerned, just from a strong aspect from Saturn to the house ruler. It's possible anyway. But these negative attitudes indicate that people really haven't faced up to their responsibilities if you're having a bad time. You haven't structured yourself properly, your plans. And a Saturn contact to a house ruler can mean that knowing when to act can be a problem. So over the years, with time, through these disappointments, you get the experience, which is another Capricorn keyword. Right, from Mars to a house ruler as an energizing aspect, an urge to get the job moving. The house or the houses that are ruled by Aries then will involve more expenditure of energy than most. That is over an extended period of time anyway. And a stronger degree of ego involvement in your attitude towards the matters. That's also very Mars. Venus. Venus to a house ruler. The affections are involved, or an element of pleasure. That can be light-hearted amusement or gross indulgence, whatever you want, depending on how you're using it. Right, you can also use charm to achieve the needs of the house involved when you have an aspect from Venus, using the positive side. Although if you've got hard aspects or a quincunx or opposition or square, you can have some time before you get the hang of that. You tend to overdo the charm and people sort of get put off with it. Right. Mercury. The attitudes will be less stable towards that thing than if any other planet had been making it, I think. Possibly except Uranus or the Moon in that order. Mercury is mercurial in its nature. It's a mutable sign. But if Mercury were in a fixed sign, for example, going back to the sign of the house ruler, even if Mercury were in a fixed sign making an aspect to the house ruling planet, there would be more stability. You could expect it anyway. Less uncertainty of attitude. Right, Moon. Your attitudes will be influenced through your early childhood conditioning. Now that's going back to fourth house comment there. Subconscious lessons learnt. Your attitudes will have come, more literally from your mother or whoever your mother represented. Also, there'll be some fluctuation in the attitude in a lunar way, more predictable cyclic sort of change of attitude, rather than Uranian. Right, and it's also a deep-seated emotional outlook towards this matters involved. The Sun, if the Sun aspects the house ruler, there's a link between your basic central self and the matters of the house is concerned. So that means the ego is involved, and that will be important. You'll have pride involved in the matter. Rushed over that a little bit. Okay, which leaves about no time at all to really bring in the problem of planets versus cusp. Right, so you've got Pisces on the cusp, which is fairly nebulous and idealistic. And just for example, you say you have a Sun, Moon and Mars conjunction inside that house in Aries, for example, you're going to have this tremendous difference. Your attitude is going to be completely at odds with this impulsive energy inside the house itself. So, it's great when you've got Taurus on the cusp of the house, and inside is Venus and Taurus. Everything's very smooth and very pleasant, very comfortable. But when you have that tremendous difference between Sagittarius on a cusp, Uranus inside it, you've got an immediate imbalance. What most people tend to do, I think, is to you really react according to your energies, unless the planet's unaspected. So the planet would normally win out, except that you might fool yourself into thinking that you're really doing it in the manner reflected by the house cusp itself. Right, so if you have got a nice agreement between the planets and the house cusp sign, that's a fairly comfortable area in which you'll come back to, and sort of a place where you can relax those matters involved in your life. But if there is that clash, you'll generally have to either fool yourself or live with your conscience that you're doing a reasonable job between the conflicts. It's something you have to sort out for yourselves. Okay. Right, I won't go over the aspects because really you can use them well enough. I think that fairly well covers it briefly.
Just out of curiosity, we've been talking about the exaltation, detriment, and fall type of thing for a bit.
Yeah.
And I did a chart about 2 months ago of a lady who had every planet but Venus in either detriment or fall. And I wasn't sure how to take that or how to interpret it. But she didn't seem to have a particularly difficult life.
No.
And how would you relate to that?
Yeah. I think it's a lower efficiency type thing, though. Say Venus is in Scorpio. What am I talking about? Venus is in... Well, Venus and Virgo, say. You learn to live with it, don't you, Bruce? Venus and Virgo. My wife's got it too. Quite a few people here with Venus and Virgo. You realise your limitations. You try not to be too picky. You don't worry too much about it if you can help it. If you do find yourself worrying, this is where astrology helps a lot.
So there'd be lots of learning experiences.
Yeah. It can take a lifetime.
Before you could just say word on mutual reception.
Mutual reception, where one can sort of, it's almost you can change places and look at it reverse. Yeah, I'm just talking about attitudes really with the house cusps, but are you interested in mutual receptions?
I was just wondering what their effects might
to the attitude, yeah. Well, that's a good one. Our Sun and Moon one's quite good because you've got this receptive and positive thing. But my mother-in-law has Mars, Saturn in mutual reception, and she hasn't had a lot of trouble. Okay, thanks very much.